Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. You know we love to break down some amazing stuff, and today we're diving into the golf swing of, well, a guy who needs no introduction at this point, but we'll give him one anyway. Ludvig Åberg.
Yes, this is going to be fun.
This guy has been on an absolute tear since turning pro. I mean, PGA Tour win, Masters runner-up, and now a top 5 player in the world, all in, like, what, a year?
It's really been something else, a meteoric rise for sure.
So obviously we need to know what's going on. How is he doing this?
Right, what's the secret?
So today we're going to be using a really cool resource to do just that. It's called a comprehensive report. It's by Dr. Phil Cheatham, who's this sports science expert. And he used this cutting-edge technology called Sportsbox AI, which is basically like this 3D motion capture system. It analyzes every little detail of a golf swing.
It's really remarkable.
So we're talking like Moneyball, but for golf. We're going to try to break down all this really complex biomechanics into something that we can all understand and hopefully even learn a thing or two.
Yeah, you don't have to be a pro to benefit from understanding some of these principles.
Okay, so before we get into Åberg specifically, I think it would be helpful to give our listeners a little more background on this Sportsbox AI thing. What is it exactly looking at?
So imagine this, right? They basically create like a virtual skeleton of Åberg superimposed on his actual movements. And then the AI can track every single joint and segment of his body, measuring all sorts of things: speed, angles, timing. And they crunch all this data into 5 key categories: rotations, horizontals, verticals, rotational speed, and release.
Okay, so pretty comprehensive then, huh?
Yeah, very much so. They even offer certification courses if you really want to go deep into the science behind it.
Right. Noted for the off-season. But let's get back to Åberg. So this report highlighted some pretty impressive stats right off the bat, one being something called his efficient horizontal transition.
Yes, that is definitely one of his major strengths. He's actually in the 76th percentile for both chest and pelvis movement towards the target during his swing.
Okay, so I need you to back up for a second. What exactly does that even mean? I mean, isn't a golf swing just about, swinging the club back and forth?
Well, yes and no. It's not just about rotation. It's also about how the golfer shifts his entire body towards the target during the downswing. So as Åberg transitions from his backswing to his downswing, his chest and pelvis move smoothly towards the target, almost like a surfer riding a wave.
Okay, so it's like this controlled forward momentum throughout the swing.
Exactly. And this efficient horizontal transition is a key factor in consistent ball striking.
Gotcha. So it's not just about hitting the ball hard, it's about hitting it with precision. Makes sense. Now, what else jumped out at you from the report?
Well, we can't talk about power without mentioning Åberg's phenomenal chest rotation. He gets a whopping 102 degrees.
Wow. 102 degrees. Okay, that's got to be good for something, right?
Oh, yeah. This is where the concept of X factor comes in.
X factor. Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So picture this. As you rotate your chest back during the backswing, you're basically winding up a spring. Your hips are resisting that rotation, creating tension. And the difference between your chest rotation and your hip rotation, that's your X factor. The bigger the difference, the more power you can generate when you unwind in the downswing.
So it's like storing up all this energy and then releasing it all at once.
Exactly. And Åberg has an X factor in the 69th percentile, which means he's generating a ton of power from that huge chest rotation.
Okay, so 102 degrees of chest rotation plus a high X factor equals serious power.
Yeah.
I'm following you. But I'm guessing there's more to his swing than just those two things, right?
You were absolutely right. And this is where it gets really interesting. We're talking about Åberg's wrist speed gain factor.
Okay, wrist speed gain factor. Never heard of that one before.
It's all about how much his wrist speed increases as the club moves from the top of the backswing down to impact. Imagine cracking a whip right. There's a sudden acceleration that creates all that speed at the tip.
So he's basically whipping the club through the ball.
Precisely. And his wrist speed gain factor is ridiculously high. It's 2.16, which puts him in the 92nd percentile.
92nd percentile. Wow. So how does that actually translate to, real-world results?
We're talking phenomenal club head speed. 119 miles per hour, to be exact, which is above average even for PGA Tour pros. That's the secret to his distance and accuracy.
So it's not just about raw strength. It's this incredible whip-like action he's generating with his wrists.
Exactly. Efficient energy transfer, taking that powerful chest rotation and wrist speed and turning it into pure power at impact. But are you ready for this? Even with all these strengths, there's still some areas where even a world-class player like Åberg has room to grow.
Oh, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Let's hear. What did the report highlight as potential weaknesses?
Well, one area that stood out was his vertical movement. His scores there are a bit lower compared to his other strengths.
Okay, so before we go any further, remind me what exactly is vertical movement again?
It refers to how the golfer's center of gravity moves up and down during the swing. Ideally, you want a slight upward motion as you transition into the downswing, which can help generate more power.
So like jumping into the swing almost.
Yeah, kind of. And while Oberg's vertical movement isn't bad, it's not quite as optimized as some of his other areas.
But wait a minute, didn't we just spend the last 5 minutes talking about how incredibly powerful his swing is?
We did, and that's what makes this so interesting. Even the best players in the world have areas where they can improve. What's fascinating about Åberg is how he's able to compensate for this relative weakness with his other strengths, like his horizontal transition and that crazy wrist speed we talked about.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah,
Maximizing your strengths and, working on the areas that might need a little extra attention.
exactly. It's a good reminder that we all have our strengths and weaknesses. It's not about being perfect, it's about understanding your own swing and optimizing what you've got.
Man, it's deep, and we're only just getting started. We'll be back in a flash to continue our deep dive into the phenomenal swing of Ludvig Åberg. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're talking all things Ludvig Åberg and his incredible golf swing. Now, before the break, we were talking about some areas where he could potentially improve, and you mentioned his arm speed.
Right.
Now, if I'm remembering correctly, you said that his arm speed is actually below average for a PGA Tour pro.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
Okay, so I'm a little confused because this guy is hitting bombs out there. How's he doing that with below average arm speed?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about his efficiency. He may not be using brute arm strength, but remember that crazy wrist speed we were talking about and that powerful chest rotation. He's generating a ton of power from those two things.
So he's kind of figured out a way to work smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It all works together, kind of like a perfectly choreographed dance. Each part of his body is moving in sync to create this huge burst of energy at impact.
It's pretty amazing to think that he's getting these results with less than average arm speed. It really just shows you how important it is to understand, the mechanics of the swing and finding what works best for you.
Absolutely. It's a great example of how optimizing your unique strengths can lead to some pretty extraordinary results.
It's really cool to see how technology like Sportsbox AI is kind of changing the game. And I don't just mean analyzing swings. I mean actually improving them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like having a personal trainer for your golf swing.
Exactly. And by identifying these very specific areas for improvement, golfers can work with their coaches to really target their training and maximize their potential.
It's Moneyball for golf, like you said. So this data-driven approach is changing the way players, train and compete at every level.
And think about the impact on young golfers, too, right? They're growing up with access to all this incredible technology and data. It's going to be really interesting to see how the next generation of players develops with this kind of insight.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Okay, so we've analyzed the key components of his swing, talked about his strengths, highlighted a few areas where he could potentially improve. But I'm curious from your perspective as an expert, what is it about Ludvig Åberg's swing that really sets him apart? What makes it so unique?
That's a good question. For me, it's the seamless integration of all these different elements. It's not just about his individual strengths, the efficient transition, the powerful chest turn, that incredible wrist speed. It's how they all work together in perfect harmony. His swing is fluid, it's powerful, and maybe most importantly, it's incredibly consistent.
So he's found that sweet spot between power and control. He can bomb it off the tee, but he can also, dial it back for those finesse shots.
Precisely. And that's what makes him such a tough competitor. He's got all the tools and he knows how to use them.
He's like a well-oiled machine out there.
Well, I think we've officially dissected every angle of Ludvig Åberg's swing. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to our listeners. What's the one thing you want them to take away from all of this? What can we all learn from this young phenom, even if we never even, step foot on a golf course?
That's a great question. I think the biggest lesson here is that, success in any field, whether it's golf, business, art, whatever, it's rarely about raw talent alone. It's about understanding the underlying principles, the mechanics, the science behind what you're doing.
So it's about being a student of your craft.
Exactly. And then it's about, relentlessly pursuing those little improvements day after day, swing after swing. It's about finding your own wrist speed, so to speak, that unique advantage that lets you maximize your impact. I love that. So it's not about copying Ludvig Åberg's swing. It's about finding your own unique strengths and, relentlessly pursuing excellence in whatever you do. Yeah, it's about finding that thing that gives you that edge, that sets you apart. And hey, maybe for some of our listeners, it really is their wrist speed.
Could be. But even if you're, not a golfer, the principles we've been talking about today, they really do apply to just about anything.
For sure. It's all about taking these complex things and breaking them down into smaller, more manageable pieces, understanding the core principles, and then focusing on those little incremental improvements.
Yeah, and it's a journey, not a destination, right? There's always going to be areas where you can refine your skills and push yourself further and find new ways to get better.
Absolutely. And speaking of getting better, I got to give a shout out to Dr. Phil Cheatham and his work with Sportsbox AI. I mean, his analysis of Ludvig Åberg's swing has been incredible.
Yeah, he's really doing some groundbreaking stuff. And for anyone out there who's like, man, I want to learn more about this, I definitely recommend checking out the Sportsbox AI app or even their certification courses.
Yeah, great resources for sure. And even if you're not a golfer, the principles they're teaching can be applied to any sport or any skill, really. It's all about understanding those fundamental mechanics and finding those little tweaks that can make a big difference.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand about what you're doing, the better you can become.
Well said. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the incredible swing of Ludvig Åberg. Hope you enjoyed the journey. It's been fun exploring the power and the efficiency and just the constant pursuit of excellence.
It's been a pleasure being here.
And remember, whether you're on the golf course or in the boardroom or, wherever you are, find your wrist speed and swing for the fences. Until next time, keep diving deep, and thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.